Council, I just wanted to remind you of a conversation we had last year at Retreat where you guys were trying to decide if you were going to keep the 10-minute walk to a park as part of your strategic focus areas or if it was going to end up being your move to mission. You guys ended up having it be a strategic focus area on my recommendation. And the reason why that was so important is because Stacy had told you at that point, right now we were at 80-something%, I don't know, or 79, maybe 77% last year. She's like, at this point, everything's going to get much harder. And you have to be very strategic about what parcels of land we were going to pick up. Part of that was the success of that in the future was whether or not we got our bond package passed. It did pass. That's great. So now we know we have some bond funding to put towards acquisition of parkland. But we have a lot of competing, and Stacy's going to go through this, a lot of competing plans that talk about things you're trying to achieve. You've got your healthy infrastructure plan. You also have your green centerpiece master strategy, dealing with Leela. You've also got your tree canopy initiatives, your sports field studies. So all of these things are being weighed. It's not just 10-minute walk to a park. It's also what are the other priorities and how do we get closest to achieving all of those things. So with that, as you know, Stacy Anaya is one of our more strategic directors. And so she has come up with a process for weighing all of those in our decision-making with parklands. And we'll talk about some key parcels as well. Stacy.
Thanks, Claire. Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, parklands. I want to walk you through some of the ways that we're going to try to get closer to the 10-minute walk to a park goal that we have of achieving 85% by the end of this year and 100% by 2035. We'll talk a little bit about what our status is, a strategy that we've developed to analyze potential acquisitions and opportunities for doing that, some specific properties we've looked at and identified, as well as kind of our next triangles and how we look at neighborhoods as a whole, and then some other projects that are on board for how we will get closer to our goals. So remember, this is the Healthy Infrastructure Plan overall recommendations in a map, otherwise known as Stacy's brain on a piece of paper. And it really highlighted key areas that we needed to look at for bridging those gaps. And not only looking at where our gaps were, but where our possibilities were and how we could leverage partnerships and current resources to get there. This is what informed our bond package. And is kind of, as you were gonna, if you're gonna read that map in narrative form, this is what we are kind of looking at. And what we're gonna focus on today are the first couple of priority action steps and looking at ways that we can take advantage of existing infrastructure and develop it as parkland or create connections to, looking at things, how we might improve some of those 10 audit parks or expand our multi-use areas for sports fields and encourage a recreation sports reemergence in Lewisville versus just select sports and how we know it today. And then how can we look for opportunities, really, and we just got finished talking about it, is how can we incorporate parks and open space into redevelopment, infill development, when we're looking at redoing multifamily housing. So this is the 10-minute walk to a park map as it exists today. I'm happy to report that we've up to 84% as of last week, with a lot of the work that Jose's been doing with our mapping efforts and then some of the investments we've made along the way. We're going to talk about strategies for hitting areas in possibilities for bridging these gaps, as well as this dark purple here. Remember, the darker the purple, the more vulnerable, the more obstacles people have towards living healthy. So we were getting like calls, hey, I see we've got property in this gap. Or Claire would call and say, hey, I drove by here, there's a for sale sign out here. Or what about this and what about that? And so we needed a tool for kind of evaluating what would get us closest to the goal and be the best use of our resources. And so what we did is we took a strategy that the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department put together for their Centennial Fund. You know, they got $1 billion to expand the state park system, to do that in places where the most population lives in Texas. And they were getting calls all the time and saying, hey, you want this property? And to kind of level the playing field and take a data-driven approach, they created this thing called the Splash. So we took that and reformulated it to help us look at it at public space, undeveloped space, from a Lewisville lens, right? We look at high-level questions and decide if we want to move forward. We have a weighted analysis, and I'll show you those. And we could look at it at a citywide application with a focus on those target areas for the Healthy Infrastructure Plan. We typically do these evaluations like a desk audit with our team, and we use information for our GIS, from DCAD, from the Healthy Infrastructure, and other bits of information we can get. And then if score merits, we go out and walk the site and really see if it feels like we could develop it as a quality park for that neighborhood. And we called it LAPS. We thought it was pretty cool. All right, so, and we walked this through with our Parks Board and kind of went over our criteria and kind of machinated a little bit, massaged it, making sure it really reflected what we were looking to achieve. So our first look is just to look at size, the context, do we have accessibility, ownership of the property at this point, will it facilitate us coming in to develop, what's the current land use, is there any infrastructure there right now that would preclude us from using it as a recreation space, and is the current owner committed to the types of things we want to do and won't like destroy it before we got in there, right? So we don't have to have all yeses to move on here, but this just kind of like tells us if it's going to be possible. And then we go into a weighted criteria evaluation, and each of these areas has several subsequent questions to it that we kind of go through and analyze how it will help us meet our mission, and we kind of rate them on a good, better, best, and then we get to an overall score. And those can come out to 100, and if it's over 50, we go into a deeper analysis. If it's between 30 and 50, 30 and 60, we say, well, maybe it's not for us, you know, hey, it's not you, it's me, but let's stay connected. Maybe there's a partnership. If it's below 40, it's you, not me, let's like look another place, right? And so we look at things like that, but what we've been analyzing is undeveloped raw property, something that's like near our open spaces, what has a potential for redevelopment, properties owned by other governmental entities that we might look at, and city property that hasn't been dedicated as parkland yet, and should it be? And we've looked at over 50 properties since we put this in place like last August. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some that we've landed on, and these had relatively high scores, presented some good opportunities for us, and then look at these 3 priority deserts that are kind of like our next triangle, you know, the rhombus type thing. So let's look at these 3 properties that have come up on board. You know, we've understood that LISD is considering divestment of some of their assets. One of those is Creekside Elementary, and it scored about a 68%. It doesn't have a huge 10-minute walk to a park increase, and that's almost impacted by the agreement that we put in place for the South Ridge Elementary, but it is on a green belt, and it could serve as a sponge park, right? And it might have some opportunities for us to look at flexible sports fields there, right? So that we can get back to open rec where people can just pop up and go practice together, play together, and the like. It's also a good consideration from a defensive posture to make sure that it's not developed into a bunch of impervious cover that then empties into Timber Creek and causing us further erosion issues. So we've got some good opportunities there. With Eastern Lisdola acreage, this is their furthest most parcel that's immediately adjacent to Leela. This is in the heart of the green centerpiece. It scored relatively high. A 2 doesn't really give us a lot of a 10-minute walk to a park increase, and that's a lot is driven by the development hasn't occurred and Trust for Public Land isn't picking that up. But there's also a major highway between that and those multifamily and that space. But, like I said, it's in the green centerpiece, it's a defensive posture, it can serve as our sponge park, and it could serve as a trail and access support to gaining the areas, access to the areas of Leela that we don't quite have yet. And especially that's really, really important for our east side of the community neighbors, right? So, we'll talk a little bit about how we move forward on these. The other property that we looked at is we talked about, remember I said we were looking at those 10 audit parks. One of them was Railroad, and how do we expand our sports opportunities? And so we started looking at the McDaniel property just north of Railroad. Once again, this is more of a alternate strategy than the 10-minute walk to a park. And it scored really, really well because it would help us access, have additional access. One of the things that everybody needs to recognize is we've lost out on some really big tournaments because our lack of critical mass of sports fields in one place. Even though we have Railroad and we have Lake Park, that 2.5, 3-4 minute drive can sometimes, quash our ability to go after some sports fields. It also would have given us an opportunity to reimagine what those sports fields in Lake Park can be over a longer period of time. Turns out the owner is not interested in a sale, but we've got some opportunities for a partnership down the road that we'll talk about earlier. But the neat thing is that we wanted to show, hey, our audit process, our tool is really, really working on helping us make some decisions on how to begin conversations. So then we're looking at our 3 priority park deserts, and this is where we really are going to take a strategy similar to that we did with the national study visit with the Urban Land Institute, and look at it as an entire neighborhood and create some engagement to figure out where we should go. So the first neighborhood that we're going to look at is the Vista Ridge Estates neighborhood. It is down off of Vista Ridge Mall Drive, just north of 121 next to Rockbrook Drive and Highland Drive. It was one of our 6 focus areas in the Healthy Infrastructure Plan, and it's one of our focus areas for the Texas Forest Service Health and Human Equity Grant. In neighborhood characteristic, it's primarily residential. It's all residential. It has primarily single family, but some multifamily. You'll look at about 3,500 residents live in the area. It would increase park access for 3,400 residents, which would get us a really big boost on the 10-minute walk to a park ratio. It's got a pretty good diversity index. It does have a high median income, and it's next to some of our city park assets, but there's really limited space for us to look at right now for that development to bridge that gap. So if we are going to move, now would be the time. And so we have some small parcels that are owned by homeowners association, and there's a city-owned drainage parcel there. So we started looking in that area to see what it would do if we went in and dedicated that as parkland and made some improvements and it got a 60% score on the lapse. We're trying to figure out some ownership points right now, but the potential improvements would be there's a trail that's on the property now that was developed by the developer, and this area is maintained by the homeowners association, but this is a great walking trail, and the entire community is already using this as an open space. So we've been talking to the homeowners association and have some ways that we might create some connectivity, make some improvements to a trail that is almost 30 years old out there, and so it needs some love. And so this might be a really good opportunity for us to jump on soon. With the Meadows neighborhood, kind of looks like the state of New York. This is western boundary is 121. Southern is Round Grove, and then Edmonds, and then you got Corporate Drive up there. And this is really a combination of residential and commercial. It's about 1,800 residents in there. You see a higher percentage, about 30% in terms of our youth and seniors, a higher diversity index, and the average household size is starting to grow in this neighborhood compared to the previous neighborhood. And the median income is down around $80,000. So we look to see what nearby park access we have. Of course, we just updated our schoolyard agreement, and that's kind of created some improved access for this area here, but hasn't holistically solved the problem. But our opportunities for development and bridging gaps here is extremely limited, and most of the stuff is owned by homeowners association or it's a commercial property. So we started looking at what that singular commercial property would be, and it's kind of near 30-40. It didn't score quite as well on the lapse, though it would give a considerable amount of access to new people to the 10-minute walk to the park. The problem is it's not listed for sale right now. It's really not idealistic, and it's adjacent to some development, some areas that we don't know what their development plan is. So that's how it scored lower. So this might be where we explore maybe a usage agreement. We watch to see how the new LISD updated agreement impacts this, and really just kind of watch how people are flowing through there. Then we look at the North Edmonds neighborhood, and this is really what's most similar to the Triangle neighborhood in some of our efforts to bridge these gaps. It's residential and commercial. There is both single family and multifamily in the area. There's about 22,000 residents there, and when you look at what our youth and senior population, now you're heading north of almost 40%, right? So that's really our target market. And when you look at the average household size, it's a lot more. There's a lot more people living under same roofs, right? Median income is about $82,000. Now we do have assets around this area. We've got Lakeland Ponies Park, we've got Ralden here, and then of course we've got Sun Valley over here. So it's all around it, but it's not accessible, so this is still a desert. So what do? There are potential properties for development, there are some commercial areas and churches, and there is some city-owned drainage and adjacent parcels there for us to look like. So the first thing we did is we went and looked at the commercial properties that are adjacent, and they scored really low. Even though it would give us a boost on the 10-minute walk to a park, some of those people are already served by Lake Ridge Pony Park. And one was listed for sale, and it fronts a major road, and it recently got filed for a plat for development. And then one's not listed, and it didn't have direct access, so it really was really hard for us to figure out how we could do it, even though it was a great 2-3 acre piece of property. So that score said we need to look for other options. And so that's when we started looking, okay, what's in the area, right? So we have a small city piece of property. off of Surf Street. If we dedicated it, it would get 639 more residents, a 10-minute walk to a park. It's small, but it could serve as a pocket park or a trailhead, and it possibly could lead to a long-term connection of walkability down to Sun Valley Pool and the high school. This is what it would do in terms of solving that gap. You see it gets a majority of it, and this would be about, the size of the park is about what Old Town Pocket Park's going to be. So right now you look at it and you're like, oh, it's not very, very large because you're looking at this two dimension, but you go out there and you can feel there's a little bit more possibilities. So then we were like, well, but how do we create connectivity? How do we make it safer to move? And so we started looking at other things. And we have a city drainage way, and it really could maybe be a possible trail development, right? You could add another half mile of trail. You could enhance the connectivity to Ralden and Lakeland, and there'd be connectivity to commercial areas that people are already walking. This community walks a great deal, right? They move. And so this would really help. It really wouldn't require any easements, but it would require some significant engineering. And then, so we think of big moves, right? And I'm always thinking of bigger moves. So what if we did it and we did the entire drainage district that would connect you to the high school, would connect all the assets along here, and really bridge that entire gap and just facilitate movement to existing assets. And so this is one of the things that we're trying to think of. This might be where we want to go long term and give us an opportunity to get in and talk to the community similar to the ways that we did in the Triangle. So, before we get to decisions and comments, other projects that are going to get us closer there. We got the Centennial Trail, and we'll be talking to y'all soon about scheduling a groundbreaking there to celebrate that. The DCTA trail extension south of the Carrollton, we're still trying to determine what the impact of the federal state of being is going to be on that funding, but we've also got some opportunities to maybe work with DCTA to create pocket parks along there in spaces they own. Of course, we've just started, we're at 30% design for the Lid Trail near Rockbrook Elementary, and then we've been working on some parkland dedication and development, whether that be outright dedication and development on whether we're doing it or if we're working with some agreements with the developers to get there, just to help us with overcome bandwidth issues. We've got the Spinks warehouse trails that are coming online that are going to connect the Creekside mobile home area eventually with Harmon, is it Harmon on 3040? Is that Harmon High School? And then, of course, we're looking at some Old Town properties for acquisition, because remember, from a density standpoint, we're trying to hit 5-minute walk to a park in Old Town, because Wayne Ferguson can't handle every dog that's walked in the downtown area. We've got to get better at that, right? So we're trying to get there. So our next steps would be at the Creekside Elementary School would be to begin our due diligence and start conversations with LISD if it's something y'all are looking at. The Lisdola property, I think we're going to monitor interest in the property and reach out to LISD to see, is this something that we could work on over time? And there might be some other opportunities along that corridor bubbling up. With the McDaniel property, what we'd like to do is we've been having some conversations with some of the family representatives, and they are interested actually in developing that piece of property. And some of the things that they've talked about is a sports complex. Well, rather than us making improvements at Railroad, them building something and they don't work together, how can we go into an agreement to see how we could bring kind of a master plan for that area to really leverage public-private dollars to help us meet our common goals and protect this place from becoming an industrial site in the heart of the Green Center piece. So that's one of the things that we'd like to do and kind of take your temperature on. So before I go to the next slide, I'm going to kind of hold here to see if on these things y'all have any questions or...
Council.
I think the Creekside Elementary School parcel is going to be probably quite expensive. Any idea what the building value or land value is?
We haven't started yet. We wanted to make sure on y'all's side.
That's the only thing I'd see is...
It'll also be it'll be a ways off, just because they've got to decommission and figure out how to wind down things, so.
Yeah.
They're not...
Are you looking at the building too, or tear down? Complete tear down?
We haven't gotten that far, but there definitely is the desire for the open space, but there may be some functionality to a portion of the site. We haven't gotten that far.
Liz Dola, I love. The other, I will just not even discuss.
Okay.
Stacy, on the drainage pathway, is there a cow path there now?
So can I go, we don't have any comments on this, that's my next slide to talk a little bit more in depth of those.
Okay.
I had some questions about the drainage area too.
So any more on these three? We're good? All right. All right, so the Vista Ridge Estates neighborhood, what we were going to start with right now, that's where we have the green space that's down there in the southwest part of town. We're going to do a property research look to see if we can talk about acquisition. We've got 4B funds and bond funds available for something like this, a potential partnership with the HOA, and looking at trail and green belts enhancements to keep it more like a natural native it's not going to really be too much of a programmed area. On the Meadows neighborhood, we're just going to monitor the usage of South Ridge Rockets Park right now. Maybe consider some access agreements to either a multifamily or some of the church entity properties to see if we can bridge those gaps that way. And then the North Edmonds property. So to answer your question, Mayor, there are some cow paths out there. I've walked it. I've watched people. Sometimes people move up and down the drainage way when it's dry.
Mm-hmm. Growing up, that was good Lord. Thank you for that. I scared the heck out of myself. That was a huge play area for us.
Okay.
But are we going to offer rafting when it rains?
Well,
rafting and stuff.
that's a fair and great question. Well, we could try to kayak down it if you'd like it to be a kayak way, but our idea was more to engineer a trail that would be above it, that in some cases would hover above it or use the right-of-way space that's already cow pathed for that. It will take some ingenuity.
It's great for skateboards, for skating, for bicycles, for all of that. I mean, I almost broke a knee there.
Safety first.
Safety first.
Go with a buddy just in case you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it would be different. But the way that we really want to approach this is before we say this is what we're going to do, because the look that you are gave me at the beginning was the same look that people gave us when we said we're going to go build a park in the Triangle.
Well, mine was just... Because I know what happens when it rains there.
Yes, it does.
Real quick.
When we've been watching it. So we've been going out and sitting on the banks, and we think that this is great. But what we want to do is we want to take plow, and we want to start building a relationship with people that live in this community. Because if you've driven by, Lakeland Ponies Park is full all the time. And so people are getting there somehow. How do we facilitate people getting there more safely, to get to school more safely and enjoy those elements there, and be different than every solution is we're going to buy a piece of property and build a new park. Right? So that's what we want to do. So the next thing that we would, and so what we would do is we would start our outreach with Plow and Now, and start that engagement where we develop a relationship, and it's not necessarily transactional in nature. I want to get to know you and understand what you need from us more than what I think you need for you. And then what we're going to do is we want to continue to use the lapse analysis, and we want to enhance the tool for measuring viability of partnerships and other agreements, right? So we want to continue to use data to help inform how we attack this. Good?
Good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Stacy, just
Yes,
one
sir.
quick question. There is a that neighborhood on 35 south of Business 121, where all that right of way, all those homes were taken out.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on with that? And is that even on your radar?
Are you talking about like cities?
No, I'm talking 121 South, before you get, I think, to the Volkswagen. Well, definitely before you get to...
Between Fox and 121?
Yeah.
Yes.
So they push back all that, basically that entire row of homes. It's little, I don't even know
This
who
right here.
mows it right now.
It's this right here.
Yeah.
That is like cities, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, is that what you call it?
Is it
Okay.
on our
They-
radar? Yes.
They titled that back to the property owners after they tore the houses down.
No. Some yes, some no. Some's retained with TxDOT,
My sister-in-law.
and some will come to us, and we're trying to figure out what we do there.
Okay.
So it's on our radar, yes, sir. And it is part of the 10-minute walk to a park solution.
Okay, great. That was all I had. Thank you.